I was sitting there thinking, where are all the lesbians?
Hello, I am Kay Anderson, and you are listening to Lost Spaces, the podcast that mourns the death of queer nightlife. Every episode, I talk to a different person about a venue from their past, the memories that they created there, and the people that they used to know. Now, have you ever had someone try to gently coax you out of the closet by asking the seemingly innocent question, "Is there anything that you want to tell me?" Do you remember the anguish and the pain of finding the strength to simply mutter the 3 or 4 words needed to confirm what they have suspected? Well, if you have, then I think you're going to enjoy this week's episode. I am talking to comedy writer and actor Lisa Haas about her very first trip to the lesbian bar Three Sisters, which was in Denver, Colorado in the 80s. We talk about how depressing a lesbian bar can be on Christmas Eve, the awkwardness of coming out support groups, and we ponder what signal your sister may be trying to send you when she offers to buy you a plaid shirt. I wonder.
Like, I realized that I was gay or queer when I was in 6th grade. And I felt like struck by a bolt of lightning when I realized that. And I was like, oh my God. And for some reason, I knew it wasn't good. And I remember when I realized that, I came home from school and we had a set of encyclopedias. And how I knew to look this up, I don't know. But I grabbed the H book and was like, and looked up homosexual. And then, it says, homosexuals are blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, oh my God, that's me. And I opened the book so carefully so I wouldn't break the spine on the H or on the homosexual part, because I didn't want anyone, my mom or anyone, to catch that somebody was reading that in the house. And I was just beside myself.
So I've got a few follow-up questions. The first is, how old was this set of encyclopedias and what information did it give you about homosexuals? And were there diagrams?
Sure, there were not diagrams, but I know, right? But the encyclopedias were published in about, I think they were like a 1975 version of encyclopedias. So they were a little neutral about the homosexual, but they also, I think they mentioned that it was a deviant psychological situation. Yeah, that's a real bummer to read when you're like in 6th grade. So I don't remember it being all terrible, but it wasn't something you would read and go like, oh, that's amazing. You're just like, that's tragic.
And so you said that it hit you like a bolt of lightning, and that's when you realized. What was happening at the time that it hit you?
There were a couple of mean boys picking on another boy in the hallway between classes, and they were screaming at him, "You're a faggot." And I don't know if he was or I have no idea. They were picking on this kid, and when I heard them say that, I kind of knew what they meant, and I was like, "Oh my God, that's me." As in, somebody who's...
So you made someone else's torment about you.
Yeah, or I recognized, yes, this person was getting tortured, and I was just like, I'm so glad I'm invisible to those boys right now, because they're so focused on the faggot that they're not going to see me, and I'm just going to creep down the hallway and go into class, because I didn't want them to recognize that about me, but how would they? I don't know. But so that's how I was struck, like a bolt of lightning. Somebody else was being tormented, and I slipped under the wire and got away.
Oh, so it wasn't that you were in gym class and you saw boobs jiggling.
No, I know. I wish. I wish. No, it wasn't that. It was like horrible. Followed by
Oh.
running home after school and grabbing the H and yeah.
So, encyclopedia, no boobs jiggling in the gym class. That's where we were. We were talking about what it's like growing up in Denver. So
No boobs are jiggling.
After the awakening, yeah, what was it like being a queer kid?
Mortifying, right? Mortifying because I knew that I couldn't tell anybody. And the message that was being sent from parents and just people in general about homosexuals were that they were bad people and that they molested children, was kind of the overriding message. And they would, like molest children and make them, like they could turn them gay. And I thought to myself, well, I'm not going to molest any children. Do you know what I mean? I was like, well, I'm gay. And or I think by that time I realized, well, I'm a lesbian and I'm not a bad person. And I'm not, that's a little bit of hooey, and at the same time, I really didn't know any gay people. I definitely didn't know any lesbians. And then I, in high school, there was a guy who was out, who was gay and who was out. But yeah, I really didn't know. I think that was the only gay person I knew in high school was this one particular guy. I didn't know any lesbians. Like I was always on the lookout for somebody who might be a lesbian. And I'm sure there must have been, but I could not.
What criteria were you using to define lesbians in your midst?
Well, the criteria was like just sensing people's energy, really. Because I
okay.
didn't know there were things like you could wear Doc Martens or get a really short haircut,
Or talk about your pet cat.
Right. I didn't know that those were the signs, so I was like looking for just trying to pick out people's energy, and I did not pick any.
Aww.
And to this day, I still don't know anybody from high school who was a lesbian. Word has it somebody 2 grades below me that my sister knew is a lesbian. I mean, that's from my height. That's it. Like this rumor of one person.
So in 6th grade is an early time to figure it out. What was the journey from there to meeting your first real life lesbian?
Well, the journey was sad and lonely. and it was just sad and lonely.
Sorry for laughing.
Oh yeah, no. But it's also comical. It's also comical too. But I used to go watch the girls' basketball team practice, and I would sit in the bleachers and like an idiot applaud if somebody made a basket, because I was like, oh, I'm gonna go watch the girls' basketball team practice and show my support, thinking that some of them were lesbians, but that just didn't yield. That was like a waste of my time, and so I just was like, wow, I don't know any lesbians. I was always like on the lookout for them, and then I went to college, and I thought, oh my God, surely there's going to be lesbians in college, right? Surely that I'm going to meet all these lesbians. And then it turned out nobody seemed to be a lesbian. And then there was this one woman I had a crush on, whose name is Cheryl Ann. I had a crush on her, and I thought maybe she's kind of a lesbian. I don't know. But so we were in a couple classes together in the first year that I was in college. And then after that first year, she dropped out of that school and moved, I believe, to Oregon to get a job and to eventually go to school there. So she left, but we stayed in touch. Like she wrote me a letter and I wrote her a letter back. And then a following year over a Christmas break, she called me and she's like, oh my gosh, I'm here at home for Christmas break. And I was like, oh, that's so great. And we were like, oh, let's get together. And we were talking, and then she said, there's something I have to tell you. And I started to think like, oh, and she was like, and I don't know how you will feel about it. And I hope you'll still be my friend afterwards. So I knew, and I kind of knew what was coming. And I was on a landline at my parents' house in the basement, and these landlines, anybody at any time could pick up the receiver somewhere else in the house and listen in. And sometimes they did. But I was just going, oh my God, I hope nobody hears this. But so Cheryl Ann said, I'm a lesbian. And I was like, dun, dun, dun. First of all, I was so impressed that she had the guts to tell me. And then I was like, well, I have something to tell you too. I was like, I'm a lesbian too. And she's like, really? She was like, let's go be lesbians together. and I was like, I was over the moon, and we were like, she was only here for like a week for Christmas break, and we're like, we'll get together and go do something lesbian. And she didn't have a car, but I could borrow my parents' car. So I was like, I'll drive. And she's like, I'll find a place for us to go. And we figured out, and then I think over subsequent phone calls figured out what day we were going to meet. And weirdly, we were both able to meet up on Christmas Eve. So we're like, okay, great, we'll meet up on Christmas Eve. Like, I had no idea what we were going to do, but I went to pick her up in my parents' Ford station wagon. It's called a Country Squire was the maker model of it. And so this old station wagon, like I went to go pick up my friend in this and she didn't care. She didn't care it was an old station wagon, but she came out and got in the car, and she had this like little newspaper with her. And she was like, she's like, this is amazing. I found where we can go. And she opened it up and she was like, look, here's a lesbian bar. And they're having free hors d'oeuvres tonight until like 10 o'clock tonight. And we were like, oh my God, the cocktail weenies. We were just so excited that there was hors d'oeuvres at this lesbian bar. I didn't even know there were lesbian bars. Like, I didn't know where we were going to go. But she was like, we're going to go to this lesbian bar.
Yeah, so this newspaper that she had, how did she find it?
That's what I wanted to know. And I said, I was like, hey, well, so what's that magazine? And she's like, it's just some gay rag my friend Robert gave me. So she must have had a friend named Robert who was gay. And then I was like, Oh, yeah, I've seen that. Like I wanted her to think I knew I was in the know. I was so not in the know. So I was like, God, she's so sophisticated. She has this newspaper little rag thing. And she was like, okay, we're going to go to Three Sisters. And we figured out where the address was. And it was in kind of northish Denver, in a neighborhood that is now, because I looked it up because I was like, whatever happened to, called Highland, I think is the neighborhood, which maybe it has been for years, but it's called Highland now, and it's a neighborhood that's been gentrified and is like nobody could afford to live there in the world. I'm not sure who's living there, but it's amazing. But then it was not gentrified, and so we drove there. We figured out how to get there, and we drove up to what we thought was there was a building kind of in the back of a parking lot, and we were like, is that it? And so we were like, okay. So I like drove the car really slowly and circled around the front so we could see the address. And that was the address. Like, they didn't have a sign that said the Three Sisters, because they didn't want to advertise, but there was an address there. We were like, okay. And so I drove the car and parked it way in the back of the parking lot because I was worried, like, what if it broke? Or what if the starter went out and I'd have to call my dad? And then I didn't want him to think thinking ahead, right? And didn't want him to think that the car was parked by this particular establishment, But I don't, and maybe that was the first time Cheryl Ann ever went to a lesbian bar. I'm not sure, but we were both sitting there going, okay, what should we do? And we're like, okay, let's just sit here for a couple of minutes. And then we heard some gunshots in the neighborhood. It was a neighborhood known for crime. And we were like, are those gunshots? And we were listening, and we heard some more, like not near us, but somewhere in the neighborhood. And we were like, okay, those are definitely gunshots. And so we were like, okay, let's just sit here for a while and like wait for it to blow over. And we did. And then pretty soon there was no more gunshots. And then we're like, okay, we're going to have to get out of the car and make a run for it to the front door of this place. So we don't get like.
So before you got there, did you ever find out what those gunshots were?
I mean, no, I at the time, like, there wasn't, like, on the news tonight, there was a shootout in, I'm pretty sure they were gunshots because they weren't firecrackers, and it was, like, Christmas Eve, and there was snow on the ground, and I don't think people were out shooting off firecrackers.
But they were shooting their fellow man. Okay.
Yeah, somebody was getting shot at, for sure.
Wow.
Making it all the more scarier. First, we're going to go into this deviant place, that you could get like picked off by a sniper on your way to the front door of. and so we went to the door, and I was just like feeling like so nervous. Like I just felt like it was gonna be revealed to the world that I was a lesbian. And I was just like, I was afraid to even touch the doorknob. And Cheryl Ann was acting like it was just normal. She's like, okay. And she opened the door, and the door opens into to this bar, right? That's it's small and kind of cozy. And there's a bar. And then kind of in the center of the room, there were some tables and chairs, and it was completely empty. And I didn't, that's not what I expected. I thought there were going to be people, lesbians. I thought it was empty. And we walk in and we look around, and there's one woman who was quite elderly sitting at the end of the bar and looking like she was like drowsing over her drink. And we were like, okay. And then the bartender was like, hi there, and we were like, hi. So we went up to the bar and said, okay, Cheryl, I was like, I'll take a beer. And I was like, I'd like a Diet Coke. And this woman was like, okay, and served us. And I was sitting there thinking, where are all the lesbians? Not thinking that Christmas Eve was maybe not a good time to go to a lesbian bar. But I was just like, where, what? Like my fear was being affirmed that there were hardly any lesbians anywhere. and I was just like mortified. And then we did not see the hors d'oeuvre bar. And
that was going to be my follow-up question. I was going to say, like, if there's no one there, then you get more hors d'oeuvres. So, like, it's kind of an all right situation. But no.
I know, that's what we were thinking. And Cheryl Ann was like, okay, there's no hors d'oeuvre bar. And I was like, and we were just like, what should we do? And then Cheryl Ann was like, she took her little newspaper and then went over to the bartender and opened it up and showed her the ad. She's like, oh, we're here for this. And the bartender, like, had no idea that the ad was there, and she saw it, and she kind of jumped in. She grabbed a bag of chips and went out to one of the tables in the middle of the room and just opened this bag of chips and set it on the table.
Oh, fancy.
And Cheryl Ann was like, may I bring you some potato chips? I was like, yes, thank you. And so she got a couple cocktail napkins and got some chips for us and, brought them back. And we were sitting there, like, eating these chips and drinking our drinks. And I was just like, any minute, all the lesbians are going to burst through that door. Either that or my parents, who in my, horrific fantasy was, like, tailing me. But at any minute, it'll either be my parents or all those lesbians.
So what is the collective term for a group of lesbians? A leap of lesbians?
I don't know. A herd of lesbians.
It needs to be alliterative. A liter? No. I feel like this is something we should know.
I know. A litter of lesbians.
Oh, a litter. Yes.
A litter of lesbians.
There's something kind of relieving, though, about going, like, this build up and this fear and this, like, and then going through the door. There's something that is a bit of a relief when there's no one there, because it's like, I can just relax. Right.
And we waited. Like, we were there about an hour, and Cheryl Ann was like, where are the lesbians? And I was like, I don't know. And we're sitting and not thinking. And so what is kind of sort of sad not thinking that the senior woman at the end of the bar was a lesbian, right? Because she wasn't my age. I didn't think she was a lesbian. I just was like, oh, there's an old lady at the end of the bar drinking too much. But she was a lesbian, and not really thinking that the bartender was, she was also a lesbian. But we were like, there's no lesbians here. And there were. And so Cheryl Ann was like, is there is there any polite way that I could ask the bartender if there's any other girl bars open tonight? And we were just like, wow, there's no way that we could say like, hey, your bar sucks. Are there other more exciting lesbian bars that we could go to tonight on Christmas Eve at 9:00 at night and it's snowing? And so we were like, okay, all right. So we're like, we'll go to Denny's, or with Denny's, which is a diner, a chain diner. And so Cheryl-Ann, she was like, okay. She's like, wow, I am really hungry. And I was like, we said, I am too, Cheryl. Hey,
you mean you didn't fill up on the chips?
We didn't, and we were trying to get the bartender to hear that we were. Oh, well, now we have to go on to our the dinner portion of our evening. And we were like, oh, I'd like some pancake, me too. And so we, get up and get our little coats, and we say goodbye to the bartender, and we're like, thank you. And she was like, okay, bye, girls. Like, I don't know what I thought. Like, why didn't the bartender come over and talk to us? Hey, I haven't seen you gals here. What's your... I mean, like, it was like we were kind of invisible.
So the flip side of what I've just been saying about like going into a bar and it being empty means that you've got that space is that you feel this immense pressure to either have a good time or like stay for some reason because you feel guilty that it's empty. And so you're just kind of like, what am I going to do?
That's exactly right. We felt incredibly guilty. And disappointed. Because there were no other, but we were just like, and now we're going to be rude and walk out of the bar after the bartender opened their bag of chips for us. So we were like, we can't, we have to sit here and eat some chips and kind of act like we're here to enjoy this space.
And meanwhile, the bartender probably doesn't give a shit if you're there or not.
The bartender, I don't think, gave a shit. She didn't seem mean but how do you not give a shit on Christmas Eve when there's these two 19-year-old girls in there, who look like that's the first time they've ever gone to a lesbian bar? Yeah. But yeah, she was just reading a newspaper or something. I always think about, and there's other bar stories too, but I always think about that bar which no longer exists. And I never went back. I mean, and then because I was in school and then I moved out of state. And so I never got to see it with people, more than like a couple of people inside of it. And I think for the longest time, because I've searched online and I've tried to find historical information about the bar. And I think it was the only lesbian bar in Denver for a very long time. And I think they must have closed, I don't know, maybe in the late 80s, early 90s. And this is making me think of like a couple of other places that I went to that are no longer there. One was the Gay and Lesbian Center, which actually moved to a new building, a new location and stuff like that. But in the 80s, the Gay and Lesbian Center was in like this old house that they've just turned into a center. And I didn't even know there was a Gay and Lesbian Center. And when I found out, I looked them up in the phone book and I was like, oh my God. And there was the address. And so the first time I went there, I just drove by, and then the next week I parked in the parking lot. And then the week after that, I'm like, okay, this is it. I'm going to go into the Gay and Lesbian, right? Because I'm still like looking for lesbians. Like, where are all these? Surely there must be, I imagine there must have been tons of lesbians, but where are they? And so I decided I was going to go in. I thought I was going to faint when I opened the door and I walked, because I didn't know what it looked like or where I could go or if I could sit down. So I walked in and it was just like this hallway and there was like a little desk that had flyers on it and some flyers on the wall. And there were a couple people there and they were like, hi, how's it going? And I'm like, oh, really good. And they were like, hey, how can we help you? And I said, oh, I'm just looking at the flyers. Oh. As if just looking for some lectures or just some of interest, and I was looking at the flyers and what I was really looking for was something about lesbians, right? And I saw this flyer that said lesbian coming out support group, like Tuesday nights. And I kept looking at it. I was like, I got to Tuesday nights. 6:30. And I didn't want them to even know I was looking at that. But so I was like, okay, I'll come back for the support group. And I did. And I'll just say that's another lost space. The small, unair conditioned room that the lesbians sat in a circle over the hot summer. Like, so all summer long, I went to this support group and...
Oh, so hang on. So the time, this is like 6 months after...
this is several
longer.
Years after.
Oh, several years after.
Yeah.
Okay.
This was probably like 4 years after the Three Sisters. Was that during that time I figured out there was a gay and lesbian center. And then I had moved to Montana to go to school there. But I was home for the summer. I was back for the summer. So I was like, I'm going to go to the support group all summer long because...
But so had you not come out then?
No, not to anybody except Cheryl Ann. She was the only person who I officially had come out to. Yeah, so no, I hadn't. But I was like, but I want to meet lesbians and... where do you get some pussy in this town kind of thing,
But so like in Montana, was there any pussy waiting for you? Or?
There was not any. And I know, again, I know that there are lesbians there. And I went to school at the University of Montana, and there was in the paper I read while I was there, during the time I was there was a lesbian couple who somebody tried to burn their house down. And it was never known, is this a hate crime or not? That was never discovered. And there was the Veterans Bar in town, like one night a week, they were the gay bar. And I went there one time with some friends. We were like, oh, let's go to the Veterans Bar because this is the gay night, and nobody who went was gay. But so we all went, and there were, no lesbians there. A few gay men, but no lesbians. Again, I know they existed, and now there's like, because I've looked online, there's like several lesbian organizations and groups in Montana that sound really awesome. But I don't think they existed then, which would have been like in the late 1980s.
And so then was your coming out delayed because there was kind of no reason for you to come out? I mean, I know that that's an oversimplification, or was it like that you were afraid?
Well, both, both. Yeah, I was in Montana alone with an old car, and so I was afraid. And also I was, consumed. I was going to graduate school, and I was just like, oh my God, this is my one and only chance to go to graduate school, and I need to get through this. So then during the summers, a couple summers when I was back in Denver, that's why I was like, I'm going to go to this support group.
So you plucked up the courage and you got there on the Tuesday, and the 6:30 you walked through the door. What was it like going to the group for the first time?
Well, it was terrifying. It was also exciting. And I was like, I'm actually going to see lesbians. Because I assumed that lesbians were going to, I'm going to
And then there was no one there.
Well, there was like one person. I was on time, and there was like one other person there on time, sitting in these chairs, folding chairs that were in a circle. So I sat down and kind of smiled, and the person kind of smiled, and we sat there and waited. And the two moderators came in. And I don't remember their names, but they were very nice, and they waited. And finally, the room filled up as in like 8 people showed up.
That's a good number.
That's a good number.
Yeah.
And the moderators were very nice, and they had a sense of humor. And I'd never been to a support group, so I didn't quite know how it went. And so, which was, you start out by, everybody goes around the room and says how they are, and so everybody's going around the room and like, hi, I'm Mary, and well, I had a rough week. And somebody else's, I was like, hi, I'm Lisa, and my week was okay, and then so on, right? And then the support group went on, and nobody said anything about being a lesbian. And I was, again, another blow, right? And I was like, God. And so I went back another week. Same thing. Everybody went around, how was your week? And then I went back a third time. So when it got to me, I said, well, my week was fine, but I wasn't really here to talk about my week. I was hoping we would talk about lesbians. And it kind of broke the ice for that particular group, for that particular, and everybody's like, oh yeah. And then people like then started talking about their experiences as lesbians.
But so it was pitched as a coming out group.
Was. And it was this group that had existed for a long time. So I was a newbie. So I think they'd gone through cycles of what they were talking about. And they were, when I joined them, they happened to be going through a cycle of of people were having really terrible jobs, and so they were talking about their jobs. And also, the group of women were so incredibly depressed looking. Like, everybody was so depressed, and, probably because of their job, because of being a lesbian, because they maybe had depression as well. But it was like this very depressed group of people.
And yet you came back week after week.
And I came back week after week, but I got them talking about being lesbians. So when I came back that summer, the rest of the summer, we talked about lesbians. And finally, towards the end of the summer, the two moderators said, "Hey, after this meeting, why don't we all go to the gay bar down the street?" And I was like, gay bar down the street? I didn't know there was a gay bar down the street. And then everybody was like, okay, yeah. Because I think most, if not all of the people had not been to a gay bar. And they were like, and I'm glad the moderators said that, let's just go and have a drink and just see what it's like. And they knew that people were afraid to walk into a gay bar. So I appreciate that. So we did. We all got in our cars and drove 2 blocks down the street to park in this other parking lot to go in the back door of, and I don't remember the name of it, but it was a Western gay bar. And the moderators were very, very funny. They go, and then when you come through the door, we're going to announce you. Like, Lisa, daughter of, they were joking, they didn't, but it's like, here you are, and now the world will know that. And so we were in a gay bar and stood around a pool table.
What did you explore in that group?
I think the things I talked about was, that I was afraid. I was afraid, what my parents would do. Would they disown me? I didn't feel safe. It didn't feel like a safe thing to do because just, all the messages that I got, from really the world and, my family was that, homosexuals, again, were deviants who molested children,
Mm-hmm.
Nobody likes that, right? Nobody likes a child molester, right? So, so that's, I think, mostly what I talked about. And I think I didn't talk as much as listen to what other people had to say who had been coming to the support group for much longer than I had. And there were actually 2 women, I think, on that second summer. There were 2 women who were a couple who moved from Texas to Denver, and they were both teachers, they were public school teachers. And I think they must have been in their 30s or their 40s. And they came and they were like, we can't at all be out in Texas. And they were like, we cannot be out at our jobs, but we wanted to come to Denver because we know we heard that it's a better, and they were happy that they were there. And one time when I said something about being afraid, the one woman, and really I'll never forget it, she just said, you know what? There's nothing wrong with you and you're going to be all right. And I really appreciated her saying, that's what I needed a parent to say to me. Mm-hmm. But I really appreciated that she said that, do you know?
And that's just stuck with you ever since.
Yeah. I really appreciate that woman, verbalized that, there's nothing wrong with anybody in the room and we would all be okay. I hope everybody else is okay. I mean, I'm okay, and I hope that was true for everybody else.
And they're not still in their miserable jobs.
Right. Yeah, and that's what I was thinking too. Is I hope they have new jobs.
So did you come out to your parents?
So yes, my dad actually passed away, so I never came out to him. But I moved to New York City in the 1995, 96. Well, and I should back up and say my sister suspected I was a lesbian. And before I moved to New York City, I was packing up some stuff and going through some things. And she was talking to me and she's like, is there anything you want to tell me? Because you better tell me now. And I was like, my sister's very, very aggressive. And she was like, and you better tell me now. And I was like, oh, no, thank you. And she's like, are you sure? Because you better tell me now. And then she was like, let's go shopping and I'll buy you some shirts before you move. And so we went to the mall and we walked in this one department store and my sister was like, would you like a plaid shirt, Lisa? And I was like, well, no. And she's like, look, let's go into the men's department. And
What about some dungarees?
right, I know, right? I know. And she's like, look at the plaid shirt. Don't you like this? I'll buy this for you. And I was like, well, no, I'm okay. And, and then we go on to, we ended up in the Gap. And my sister was like at the cells rack all the way across the room. It was sort of a big store. And she was screaming, look at this plaid shirt I found, Lisa. Don't you like it? Don't you want to try it on? Like screaming across this whole, the store. And I thought I was going to die. And then, so anyway, we had some clothes and we went into a dressing room. And the whole time I was there, I thought, okay, this is the time for me to tell Julie. This is the time for me to tell. Well, by the way, I am a lesbian, and I didn't tell her. And I really missed an opportunity to tell her. Right, because she was like, you better tell me now. I should have told her now, but I missed that opportunity. But
isn't that the most annoying thing?
Yes.
Isn't that the most annoying thing when people are like, oh, is there something you want to tell me? Like, why can't they just actually say what they think it is that you want to tell them? So then it makes it easier on you. So all you have to say is yes or no rather than actually say the word lesbian. Because that's a big
right,
step,
I know.
Right?
Like, ooh, that is a big step. That is a big step to say that. If people
and then
could just
spend 10 minutes going, "Are you sure? Are you sure?" Rather than just being like, "This is what I think you want to tell me."
Right. And are you sure? Are you sure? In kind of a angry, violent manner, very angry manner.
But I love that. And I love thinking about you going through the mall with your sister and her being like, oh, do you want a pool table? Oh, hey, do you want these Doc Martens? Oh, hey.
I know. It was mortifying. It was mortifying. And my sister, who I love, right, and who's a huge supporter of me, right? I mean, instead of like her version of taking somebody out for coffee or something and sitting down in a cafe and having a little heart-to-heart, her version of that was taking me to the mall and screaming, look at this plaid shirt. Don't you like it?
Well, I mean, she definitely got her message across.
She did. She did. And I was also a little mortified, too. I was like, wow, is she getting this message across to every single person in the Gap?
But do you think that everyone in the Gap would have made the same assumption?
Probably not, but it was like one of those moments where you felt like the spotlight was on you and you were like, or I felt like the spotlight was on me and I was like, caught.
Everyone must know, yeah. But so then you didn't come out, you moved to New York.
So I moved to New York and I was just like, oh my God, I bet New York City's crawling with lesbians. And it was crawling with lesbians, so that was exciting. I was like, finally, finally, there's like lesbians here who say I'm a lesbian, and there were the support groups were more exciting, and there were other groups and stuff like that to be a part of, and by this time all my friends here in New York City, I did come out to them. In fact, my first friend I came out to, I was actually staying with her right before I moved here, and her name's Lisa too, and I was like, Lisa, there's something I have to tell you. And she was like, oh, great. And she knew she was great. She goes, is it something we should also tell your mom? And I was like, no, maybe, no. And she was like, well, let's put the phone right here. And if we decide together we want to call your mom. Like, she was trying to help me come out to my mom. Aww. God love her. And so I told her, and she's like, okay. She's like, now we have to celebrate and go to a lesbian bar. And our roommate came home and she's like, guess what? Lisa's a lesbian. And like the other roommate was like, oh, wow, that's sexy. And so it was like, wow, they think it's sexy. I'm a lesbian. They're like, we have to go to a lesbian bar. And so we decided, they're like, you find the lesbian bar and we'll take you there next Saturday night. And so I went to the center, and there was always this one particular lesbian who worked at the quote unquote front desk. And I had asked her several questions in the past, and every time I would ask her a question, like, where are there some lesbian bars or what, she would like roll her eyes like another person asking where the lesbian bar is. And didn't even want to ask her because I was just like, because I have to face the eye rolling and the sighing and the gasping. But I did. And she told me about a bar named Henrietta Hudson's that does exist. It still does.
It still exists.
Yeah. And so I told my friends, this is where we're going to go. And on that Saturday afternoon, my two friends started like getting ready. I was like, what are they doing? And they were like, they put on dance music and they were fixing their hair and putting on makeup and then laying clothes out on the bed. And I was like, wow, what are they? They're getting ready. Like, this was a whole thing. Like, they were getting dressed up to kill to go out to this bar. And I was like, hey, you guys, does this T-shirt look okay? And they were like, no, you have to wear something that will get you laid. And I was like, okay. And it was really awful because they had me try on their clothes, which didn't fit because they were both really tall and thin. And I'm short and fat, right? But so I didn't fit in any of their clothes. And all I had was like some dumpy dress clothes for temporary jobs, being like a temporary secretary. And you had to have dress clothes. And I had this kind of a culotte thing. I don't even know why I had it. But I bought it at a maternity store. And I bought it because the lady said it was versatile. I could put a sweater on it and it would look like an entirely different outfit with a sweat. Anyway, so these culottes, and somebody gave me their black tights, and then I had these tie shoes on. It was just, then they put makeup on me. Right, they put makeup on me. I don't wear makeup, but they did it with the best intentions. But I was just like, feel like a freak, but I don't care. We're going to a lesbian bar, and we go to the bar, and we get drinks, and we get a table, and then my two friends say, they were like, oh, we want to dance. We watch our purses, and I was like, of course. And they get up and so for 2 hours they danced together. And we're flirting with each other and other women on the dance floor. And I sat there alone with my Diet Coke and whatever their two drinks were, and like holding purses and coats.
Well, so it was your coming out and they went and danced and left you alone?
They did. God love them. God, they had the best time ever. And before we went to the bar, they wanted us to all go to a peep show. And I was like, okay, great. And then we went to go to a peep show, and they wouldn't let us in because they wouldn't let single women without a male escort into the peep show. I don't know why. I don't know if they thought they were going to try to solicit customers or whatever. And then we just moved on to the bar. But they tried to show me a good time.
So if we could circle back then.
Yeah.
And go picture ourselves in the Denny's.
Yes.
With Cheryl Ann. Mm-hmm. After that first night at Three Sisters.
Yes.
What was the feeling?
Well, the feeling then was elation. I felt like seen. I got to have a conversation with her that I never got to have with anybody. Like, she had been dating women. And she was telling me about it. And then I went on a date with this woman, and like all these things that I wanted to do, but that wasn't available to me. But she had, Portland. All right. She made the right choice when she moved there. But yeah, we just talked about like women and women she was dating. And so the feeling was I was completely elated. I felt like myself. It's like this, it felt like very hopeful. It felt really hopeful. I didn't feel perverse, right? Because I also knew that she was not a child molester. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. That she wasn't this perverted child. And here I am sitting with this really cool and wonderful person, who's also a lesbian. And yeah.
So if you were to go back in time and you had an opportunity to talk to Lisa just as that lightning bolt hit her when she saw that kid being called a fag, and she realized, that resonates with me. What advice would you give her?
I would say, don't waste your energy on feeling like a pervert. And And I would say you can totally get away with finding out about being gay without anyone knowing, as long as you're, when you're in the danger zone, like you can get away with it and not have to worry about it until like it is safe to quote unquote come out. Don't, you're not a pervert. Don't worry about it. Clearly everybody else, or, clearly their perception about it is really distorted, and get as much information as you can. You can totally sneak around. You can totally find these places. You can sleuth it down. I think that's what I would say. Don't
worry about creasing the spine of that encyclopedia. Just do it.
Yeah, just go ahead. Just do it.
Do you have any memories of Three Sisters or clubbing from your own queer scene that you want to share? Well, if you do, please get in touch. I want to hear all about it and help create the biggest online record of people's memories and stories from queer clubbing. Go to lostspacespodcast.com and find the section Share a Lost Space and tell me all about what you got up to. You can also find me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter as Lost Spaces Pod. Check out Lisa's podcast, In Heat, a lesbian comedy, wherever you stream podcasts. And make sure to follow her on Instagram, Lisa Haas Actor. All of this will be in the show notes. Don't worry, I've got you. Lost Spaces is not only a podcast, but a concept record as well. I have been writing songs about queer venues and the people who used to live their lives there, and will be releasing songs over the coming year. You can hear the first single, Well Groomed Boys, which is also playing underneath my talking right this very second, on all good streaming platforms. If you enjoyed this episode, I would really appreciate if you subscribed, left a review on your podcast platform, or just told people who you think might be interested in giving it a little listen too. I am Kay Anderson, and you have been listening to Lost Spaces.